Are we recording? Okay, fantastic. Happy Monday. Welcome back to the Health Revival Show.
Yes, it is almost halfway through the summer, which is just insane to me.
It's really sad. I don't want this weather to go away. I can't deal with more winters. I'm over it.
I
So
just
we're just
can't
gonna
deal with
soak in it.
Illinois as a whole right now. It's just doing me dirty in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Yes. Illinois is basically, you guys, Illinois is the worst state to live in when you run a business. I would
hmm
dare to say.
I think it's just bad all around.
Yeah.
And our governor is apparently going to go for another term, and people just don't see what a horrible person. Anyway,
It's
so
fine.
Texas or Tennessee, here we come. We're looking at Tennessee again because wild things going on in Texas. We're heading down to Texas this week. We'll see what we think, what we like, the heat. I'm not sure. Will I survive? Will I survive with two kids on an airplane? The heat.
Will you even get there?
But I'm really excited. I'm excited to go down, at least look around and check it out, and then may go back and explore some other areas of Tennessee.
Yeah.
God's
The,
got the plan. I just wish that he would come down here and lay it out and tell me. One of our friends, head practitioner at Vital, told me that she had a dream about me the other night that I was pregnant again.
oh,
And I was like, oh, really? No, I don't think that's happening. And she's like, it was really funny because you had your hair like super, super curly. She's like, don't do that in real life. It was cute because like you were pregnant, but like don't do it in real life. And I was like, yeah. So Art was in the background. He's like, yeah, I did it again. I was like, well, no, like we shut that down. So I don't.
oh, that's so great. I love.
And sometimes you just want to know what it is,
I know.
but instead we just wait and we pray and we hope for signs to know that we're making the right decision. And
That's that's what I've been doing lately. I'm like, just I prayed to God last night about some
hold on, I
things. I
don't
was
hear
like,
you.
just show me.
All right, if you're dealing with water retention, you're waking up puffy, your ankles or your wrists are really swollen, or you can't get your rings off, and maybe you're even dragging throughout the day, no matter how much water you drink, there's actually a good chance that you're not actually hydrating properly.
Exactly. Because water alone is not enough. You need electrolytes. You need sodium, potassium, magnesium, because those things actually pull water into your cells. Otherwise, you're basically just flushing it out and wondering why you're still tired, you're still bloated, and you're still sluggish.
But here's the thing, most electrolyte supplements out there aren't helping you in any way because a lot of them contain things like natural flavors, food dyes, and maltodextrin, which can irritate your gut. And these things can also spike your blood sugar when you're trying to heal.
That's why we both started using Buoy. It's super simple, just trace minerals and electrolytes in liquid form. No flavors, no colors, no sugar, no sweeteners, and you squeeze it into whatever you are drinking: water, coffee, tea, smoothies, you name it.
And it's clinically backed by science too. So studies have shown that buoy helps you hydrate better, 64% better, in fact. And that's data coming from key blood and urinary markers, not just marketing fluff. And honestly, you can feel the difference. I've had many clients tell me their digestion's improved, they have less headaches, and they're better energy throughout the day.
And Buoy isn't just for people that go to the gym all the time and sweat a bunch. They actually offer a 35% lifetime discount for anyone that's struggling with chronic illnesses. Things like POTS, Hashimoto's, Crohn's disease, chronic migraines, and every autoimmune condition. They're really committed to making better hydration accessible to people who need it most.
I actually throw it in my coffee every morning because it's such an easy upgrade. You don't even taste it, but you're definitely going to notice if you miss it.
If you're tired of playing hydration roulette and want something that actually supports your body, you've got to try Buoy. It's honestly one of the simplest ways to feel better faster.
I
You
don't
don't
hear
hear
you.
me? I don't know. I hear
I just
I
heard
hear
her fine.
myself and you. What's happening? No. I see it on my end, like in terms of the volume. Hold on.
What button got pushed?
Do you hear me now?
No, no.
No? Okay. Well, that did nothing.
Or did you do something?
I hear
You hear me? She hears me, it looks like.
I hear you and I hear you.
Now I hear you.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me go back to my headphones.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, I prayed to God last night. I was like, please, can you just show me what you're trying to teach me right now? What is it that you're trying to show me? Because I know it's something. I know that there's a lesson here. Do I need to be better at maintaining my money? Do I need to stop shopping on Amazon? Oh, I ask all the things. Um, but yeah, we talked last week. I showed on my stories that I got a great cease and desist, and it is what do I need to learn from this? And
Well,
it's
how
it.
could you have ever have known, first of all? Second of all, I don't believe that there's anything that's going to come of that. Looking at what I saw online in
Yeah,
terms of
and
this.
I talked to
At
our
least you
lawyer
don't need-
yesterday.
Okay, what did he have to say?
So he was like, the hard thing about this is that the wording of the cease and desist letter that you got is also very arbitrary. So it's like you cannot use anything confusingly similar to the hormone queen. So if I put the real hormone queen, is that not allowed either? What about the other hormone queens on social media? They didn't get a cease and desist. I actually reached out to them. So like it it is very what is okay, what isn't type thing.
Okay, well, it's like I'm going to put a trademark on my daughter's name that's Sally Ann.
I know.
So nobody can spell it the same way or put a hyphen or like this is just BS. I honestly,
Exactly.
it also says in that letter for in commerce, but then if you look at the trademark, it says basically like products that she's selling, or then it talks about like media and podcast. So what I'm guessing is that she just doesn't want you. She's probably just jelly. Let's be honest. If she's listening to this, you're probably jelly. I mean, Becca's beautiful and like your website is really needing an look. I mean,
It's petty to me. Like it's petty. Like I'm not actively sitting at your, place of business stealing clients from you. I'm just trying to promote.
you created an Instagram handle that was available through Instagram.
Exactly.
It's part of our FitMom brand. Everything funnels through FitMom. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, so what did he say? So what, you have to change your Instagram handle?
He's like, let me, because here's the hard part is that copyright lawyers are different than normal lawyers. Like, it's a completely different world and understanding trademarks and copyrights. So he's like, let me ask around, let me talk to some of my friends that are copyright lawyers. And so he's going to dive into it more for me. And he's like, I honestly don't want you to do anything in terms of like make big actions at this point. He's like, you can keep posting. It wasn't a court order, which is what you really need to like completely cease all business from. He's like, just keep posting. We have 30 days to respond to this. Let me ask around. I'm not overly worried. This is very arbitrary. And I mean, it's legit. It's from a legit lawyer. Like it's an actual cease and desist. But so that happened, and it's just, I just have to trust in God. And I have to know that and what I was thinking is like, he is setting me up for something much bigger, is what I'm telling myself. He's doing all of these things now to teach me so that when things get even larger for FitMom and the company, I know how to handle them. So, growing pains is what I'm taking from this. Is it's
Yeah. There's a lady on social media right now. Her name is like the constipation queen or something. And I was like, she used to comment on all my stuff. She's really nice. Like, whatever. Cool. Help more people get unconstipated and help them with their
yes,
health. That's what we're here to do.
yeah.
Not worry about a name. Like, I don't, whatever. I'm over it.
Anyways,
I'm over it for you. It was a really rough
it was a rough last
Friday
week.
for you. And,
We're here now. It's fine. We're going to talk about SIBO and gut health, and then we're going to talk about hormone health because the more people we can help, the better. And that's how I think everyone in this space should be, and not be petty. So, anyways, welcome to our podcast about SIBO, because SIBO, if you do not know, is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And I think it is very misunderstood.
Mhm. Oh gosh, I was really trying yesterday to be straight and to the point, but also bite my words because I have so many people who have been told that they have, SIBO from breath testing, but then they're not looking at anything else in terms of lab work or stool testing or whatever else. And that's why we really wanted to do this because SIBO is complex. And then when you have multiple types of SIBO, it makes things even more complicated. And so you're going through protocols that are really robust and they're really lengthy. And at the end of the day, antibiotics is not going to be enough. Most of the time, people go on antibiotic treatment for SIBO. They feel better during the antibiotic, but then shortly after they relapse. And actually, sometimes it can make things substantially worse in some cases. And this is because we have to think about the whole picture. I always tell this to our team. What is that 10,000-foot view? What are all the systems in the body doing? Because they're all going to be connected to the gut. And so SIBO is not just about killing bugs or bacteria, it's really a whole body approach, and restoring the rhythm in your gut, restoring your hormones, supporting your nervous system, your liver, your gallbladder, basically the entire terrain. And so that's what we're hoping to help clear up for you all today. And I will say, as we go through this, many of you, when we talk about symptoms, might be sitting there going, oh my gosh, I have SIBO. I have SIBO. That's it. I got SIBO, and we don't want that to be something that, you're afraid of, but maybe shed some light into why your colonoscopy was clear or your endoscopy was clear or why you're having all of these symptoms and conventional medicine isn't picking it up. I actually sent a teenager to a GI doctor. I recommended she go and get looked at for inflammatory bowel because of some of her inflammatory markers that were off the charts. And they basically shut down doing any further testing. And the mom asked about SIBO testing, and he said, we don't do it in our hospital here. And that just really angers me because I am of the belief that if you're not getting answers and you're not finding what's going on, then keep testing, keep digging, keep searching, keep looking at what is upregulating the immune system's response. So, one of the biggest classic telltale signs of SIBO is bloating that gets worse throughout the day. And this is where people would call it like a food baby, essentially. And you walk around like you're 4 to 6 months pregnant, and it's really uncomfortable. That's a classic sign of this. So other signs that we can, look at is that you don't break down your food well. Maybe you're having this kind of gurgling in the lower belly region, maybe some abdominal pain. You can feel constipated or that you are not fully emptying. Okay. And we'll get into why. This can certainly impact our our neurotransmitters, our mood, anxiety, depression, thinking about, brain fog. Can I stay on task? A lot of SIBO cases do go hand in hand with things like ADHD, which we'll talk about. Food sensitivities, that list just keeps growing that you can't tolerate foods. You're seemingly just reacting to everything. And we're going to clear up for you why that's going on. Chronic fatigue. And then we also look at other autoimmune things as well as fibromyalgia or chronic pain flare up. So some of those are just the symptoms and signs of SIBO. But the whole premise of this podcast is for you to understand that SIBO is not the root cause and it's not just the only thing. There are other issues that are happening in tandem with SIBO.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are three types of SIBO. Hydrogen and methane are kind of the two separate ones that a lot of times they will test for. When you do a breath test and you actually perform one, you'll see how much hydrogen, how much methane is being released. And then there's also hydrogen-sulfide SIBO. So hydrogen SIBO, the bacteria produce hydrogen-based gas. A lot of times the hard thing, symptoms can be similar and overlapping, but hydrogen-based SIBO is typically bloating and diarrhea with anxiety. Methane SIBO is a little bit more constipation, and that one is usually fullness and just like sluggish digestion. It slows down the digestion a lot. And then hydrogen sulfide SIBO, the bacteria produce toxic hydrogen sulfide gas, rotten egg. A lot of people have that really telltale, it smells like rotten egg because of the sulfur problem. So they have a sulfur sensitivity. And something that a lot of people don't understand is that there are sulfur containing amino acids. So methionine and cysteine are sulfur containing amino acids. So if you try taking N-acetylcysteine and you get gas or you get this really rotten egg smelling gas, that can a lot of times be an indication of this underlying hydrogen sulfide SIBO. A lot of times these people have pain too in their GI system and fatigue, just like complete exhaustion. And so sulfur sensitivity, a lot of people look at eggs, obviously, are a high sulfur protein. You look at things like sulfurous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, some of those more rough type vegetables. And then yes, lentils and things of that nature all can have this sulfur compound, which makes that really clear indication of that awful smelling gas. So a little bit different in how they present, but all of them are variations of this SIBO. And the tricky thing about SIBO is that SIBO is unlike other bacterial infections in the gut, to where SIBO doesn't often respond as well to just antimicrobials. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that why. But
some contributing causes, like why does SIBO happen, right? Why do I end up in this place? Definitely low stomach acid. It's kind of a root cause to all major gut issues because the stomach acid in the stomach is your first line of defense ultimately. It's kind of what helps protect against pathogens and assaults on the rest of the GI system, foodborne illnesses, all of those things. When your stomach is acidic enough, it kills those things before they can get into the small intestine, right? So low stomach acid is a huge indication. Antibiotics, chronic antibiotic use creates just an awful environment for secondary infections and kind of wipes clean all of the good bacteria. And when you don't follow antibiotics with, good postbiotics, probiotics, things that are reinfiltrating the GI system, then you leave it open to just basically be infiltrated by bad guys. Poor bile flow, because bile is helpful in clearing out a lot of toxins and clearing out hormones and clearing out all of these things from the GI system through the small intestine. And when you don't have good bile flow, that stuff can back up and then cause a lot of these underlying kind of infections. Chronic stress, heavy metal exposure, toxin exposure, vagal nerve dysfunction, because with our vagus nerve, it helps to stimulate motility through the GI system. And so the vagal toning we've talked about on many podcasts, singing, humming, gargling, healthy metabolic function. So when you're not healthy metabolically, you're going to degrade the vagus nerve and it loses its tone ultimately. So we see this a lot in people that are overweight, obese, they kind of degrade that vagus nerve. Gallbladder removal is huge. It's like TikTok after you get a gallbladder removal, what's the next dysfunction that's going to happen with autoimmunity or gut issues? Adhesions and scar tissue is a big one. So a lot of people that don't realize C-sections and hysterectomies and endometriosis and these things that can make all of the other organs in your stomach, which all are very close together, can start to become sticky and adhese. And they essentially slow down the motility through the GI system. So we see a lot of times correlations with like endometriosis and SIBO because of all of that inflammation and scar tissue and extra endometrial tissue that can start to create, blockages ultimately. Like if there's too much stuff in there that's blocking the GI system from functioning properly. So we also a lot of times will see autoimmunity as some people believe that SIBO is like a form of autoimmune in the way that it works and how, like we talked about, antimicrobials aren't it alone. Like it's way bigger than just lowering bacteria. And sometimes these things aren't even bacteria, it's gas, right? It's certain types of forms of gas. So it is complex in nature, but those are kind of some underlying contributing causes to SIBO.
Yeah. And I think from the autoimmune standpoint, we would just look at this as, the overactive immune system. So we're going to get into that too. And how does the body start to look at these pathogens? And, when certain amino acids are getting into, the bloodstream out of the lumen of the gut, like this is where the immune system starts to make mistakes. And then it starts attacking its own tissue. And we have kind of more systemic issues. I want to talk about the fourth type of SIBO, and that is SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth. So this is where we really look at things like mold, candida, right? Other mycotoxins that might be being stored, in the small intestine. And so how we address all of these is going to look a little bit different. And then also we're looking at all of the other systems of the body to say what's going on with liver, gallbladder. Do you have a gallbladder, right? Gallbladder removal is a huge trigger for getting SIBO. I have a client that has no ileocecum valve. That's the valve that connects your small intestine to large intestine. And so when we think about, I want to kind of zoom out and talk about the kind of the geography of your gut. When we think about the small intestine, that is where we are supposed to absorb our nutrients. Things get broken down in the stomach acid, pancreatic enzymes, all those things. It's moving through the duodenum into the small intestine. And here's where we get that bile to break down those fats and emulsify. Think of bile as like your Dawn dish soap. That's like really just a detergent to scrub everything out. It's supposed to act as an antimicrobial to keep bacteria in check, because your body bacteria should not be fermenting in the small intestine. That should actually happen in the large intestine. So if you think about this, the small intestine is like Maine. Okay. So it is north. It's quiet, it's clean, it should be peaceful. This is where, again, you're getting all those antioxidants, those fibers, those colors, things that you really need to help build your hormones, to have good energy, minerals, all the things there. When fermentation starts to happen here because of that bacterial overgrowth, that's basically a frat party in the library, which I thought was a really funny analogy. I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Hyman and another doctor, and he kind of gave this analogy. I was like, oh, this is good. The large intestine, it's like Florida. Okay, so this is wild, it's tropical, it's full of action. This is where fermentation of bacteria is supposed to happen. That is what it's built for. But when bacteria, again, are in the wrong places in the microbiome and they're overgrowing, this really is what starts to create this overactive immune system. And so we get pain, pressure, gas, and bloating, and things are just really haywire. So I want to talk a little bit about testing here. So you mentioned like the breath test, of course. Right now, in terms of the uh, hydrogen sulfide, there's only one test, and that's the Trio Smart test. Most of the SIBO breath tests out there are really only looking at methane um, and sulfur. So when we look at this, basically what you do is you have to starve the bacteria for a day. So you're almost fasting, or you're doing like basically no sugar, no carbohydrates. And then in the morning time, you wake up, you take your baseline test, and then you drink a lactulose, which is a non absorbable sugar drink. And 30 to 60 minutes later, that's when bacteria start to become metabolically active and start to produce these gases. So then this is what would be seen on the breath test. So as you're doing, generally it's like a 2 or 3 hour breath test. You're blowing into tubes and it's measuring, those gases, the sulfur, the methane, and hydrogen. But the problem with this is that there's a lot of false positives. The other problem that I don't love SIBO breath testing just by itself is it doesn't look at anything else. So, like when we're running a gut zoomer or a GI map, we're looking at other pathogens. We're looking for H. pylori, candida, different types of fungal strains. We're looking at various parasites like worms and protozoans and things like that. H. pylori, so we're looking more at the entire terrain and getting a much bigger picture. And you can, on those tests, look and see if you've got a lot of bacterial overgrowth associated with the different types of SIBO. So we have that in the research. And then we have the methanobacteriae, right? And then you follow the person's symptoms, because the reality is you're going to address all these things the same way. But this is where conventional medicine and a lot of functional medicine practitioners who aren't, I think, properly trained and have dealt with complex SIBO cases miss the mark. And that's where things really start to just go wrong. And I've had it. I know, Becca, you've had it too, where people come in and they've been through multiple SIBO protocols, living on a specific carbohydrate diet or a low FODMAP diet, and they just react to everything. And they think that's the way that they have to live. And it's simply not true. It's that you've missed the forest through the trees and you kept trying to hit things with antimicrobials, antifungals, or, antibiotics, and you didn't fix the problem as to why this is here. And now it's reoccurring. So let's talk about some of those common things that are overlooked that are really, really important. And I'll kick this off because I've talked about this quite a bit recently, but the gut liver axis. Okay. So when you look at your liver, gallbladder, your liver produces bile. That is a slow drip. The gallbladder stores and concentrates it. The key word there is concentrates it. So when you ingest fats, right? So let's say you have a good steak dinner with a salad with olive oil and maybe some seeds and some nuts, some really healthy fats. Your body is supposed to have that bile come through the small intestine to break down and emulsify all those fats so that you can absorb them, but then also do all the other jobs we mentioned in terms of being antimicrobial, removing toxins, sequestering, hormones, heavy metals, also thinking about stimulating insulin, stimulating motile, which is your motility hormone, all these things. But when we have all this mess going on in the gut, this between the gut liver axis really starts to put a burden on the liver, and it creates inflammation. And with this inflammation, things get out into the bloodstream known as lipopolysaccharides, or LPS. These are endotoxic to the body. So those go back to the liver to get removed. And the liver says, oh my gosh, because of this gram negative bacteria that can really be, stealth infections like C. diff and others that could be life threatening, it starts to protect itself by creating inflammation in the liver. So now you've got liver inflammation, you've got GI inflammation, right? We got leaky gut. And so it's a vicious cycle. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. When one is off, the other's off, and they're going to make each other worse. So this is why you must, in any protocol that you are doing, support your bile flow and the building blocks of bile as well, because bile is a pretty complex fluid. Most of it is, water, and a lot of people who deal with constipation and a lot of these issues aren't properly hydrated cellularly. So that's a big thing, but it's also built of different bile salts and then cholesterol. So we want to make sure that we have support in there, whether that's a TUDCA, it's ox bile, it's beets, it's dandelion, taurine, trimethylglycine, a lot of these things that can be really helpful. So there was a cool study when it comes to just like SIBO specifically, and this is something that you would be working with a practitioner around, but there was a cool study that showed UDCA Taking that 100 milligrams 3 times a day for 2 months reduced methane more than hydrogen on a breath test. So this shows how bile directly affects methane. And again, methane is not a bacteria, it's an archaea. So I learned that from the SIBO doctor. She's a Australian gastroenterologist, brilliant. And this again is something that I think so many people, when you go to conventional medicine, there's not even a conversation around other organ systems, right? How are you digesting and absorbing fats? What's going on with your bowel movements? Do you have pale colored stools? Do you have floaters? Do you have constipation? Or are we just deeming this, IBS? And really, what we're looking at is a picture of an interconnection here of the gut liver axis and poor bile flow and non alcoholic fatty liver, then that's starting to, you know, become an issue. And generally, once you see your liver enzymes elevated and your triglycerides elevated, damage is already being done. So those would be some key markers outside of gut work, stool testing and looking at the gut specifically. But on your blood panel, you can look at things like bilirubin. You can look at your liver enzymes, ALT, AST, GGT. I like to run bile acids. That can also tell us, how things are running smoothly, or if you have even enough bile acids being produced. But if your bile acids come back above a 6, so 4 to 6 is really kind of that sweet spot for bile acids, and it's backing up into the system. I just had a lab review a few weeks ago. Hers was 28. If you feel tired all the time and you're drinking water, you're probably missing electrolytes, because you need electrolytes to get intracellularly hydrated. We love Buoy because this is an easy way to get in sodium, potassium, magnesium, and trace minerals into your day without any of the junk fillers that most powders use. You're just backing up toxins. You are full. Your toxin bucket is overflowing and spilling over everywhere. And so you've got to really focus on opening up those drains, supporting bile flow in the liver before you got any business, I believe anyway, going in with any type of eradication agents, because then you get into this kill off phase where this is producing more gas, that is producing more inflammation, getting out into the bloodstream. Now that person is having systemic issues, a lot of pain, brain fog, like you mentioned, chronic fatigue. So I just wanted to really drive that home, and we'll talk through some other ones, but absolutely that is a huge miss in terms of the gut liver highway.
Yeah, absolutely. I always try to give the example of, imagine you have like an infected open wound. And if you try to go after that infection and the rest of the area around it isn't clean or open, guess what? That bacteria, those pathogens, those things are going to try and scatter. They're going to try and get away from whatever you're using to try to kill it. And it can go to different places if we don't have a clear avenue of it to get out of the body. And it'll back up and it'll create bigger issues. And so we have to make sure the area around it is clean and open and able to be cleared from before you go in and attack it. And then once we attack it, okay, we've cleared maybe the infection, takes time, takes a long time, usually in SIBO cases, but then we have this raw open wound now that's clean, but you need to make sure that it is the right environment. You can't just okay, if we just leave it there open after antimicrobials, it's going to get infiltrated again with that bacteria, with that gas, with that environment. And so it's a lot about the terrain that we're trying to create on the back end of clearing the infection. And so the other hard thing is that SIBO leads to a lot of other issues. And this is where, we have clients come in all the time and they're like, I don't tolerate any type of dairy, any type of gluten, any type of this vegetable. I have brain fog. I'm not sleeping. I have really bad periods. I have rosacea. I have whatever it might be. And it's like we have all of these different things going on. And so I'm taking this supplement for this and I'm taking this supplement for that. And it's like, no, no, no. Like this is all stemming from a couple of root things. And gut infections and gut imbalances are a major root issue for people. And so you're dealing with inflammation, you're dealing with weight gain, you're dealing with the leaky gut where you're having stomach pain or digestive issues. And the problem with that leaky gut is then not only do the things that should get out of the GI system, like hydration and nutrients, into the bloodstream to, fuel the body, well, now food particles are getting into the bloodstream, which are foreign invaders to the body, that food particles should not get into the bloodstream. And so now we have a ton of food sensitivities. We have skin rashes, we have headaches, we have all these different symptoms. And then you also have a body that is basically turning on itself because of this overactivity of the immune system. And now we have predisposition for autoimmunity, right? These people, it's kind of this trigger, and we'll talk about this in the endometriosis podcast too, but it's kind of there's this like three-headed monster when it comes to autoimmune: leaky gut or hyperpermeability of the gut, a triggering event, and genetics. And I think those three things, when combined, so many people are like, well, I have Hashimoto's. And it's like, well, there were probably things going on way before that Hashimoto's developed, right? And then SIBO is also linked to a lot of chronic conditions because, like we just talked about, what else does SIBO lead to? This chronic inflammation, this autoimmunity predisposition, these food sensitivities, this immune system overactivation. So we see Parkinson's with SIBO. 46% of patients have SIBO that have Parkinson's, ADHD, because the microbiome imbalance affects dopamine in particular, autism. SIBO is common and often worsens symptoms, Lyme disease. So a lot of times with Lyme, you see people on long-term low-dose antibiotics and also largely inflamed, and it's kind of this perfect storm. Candida and mold. Liz already talked about the SIFO that we see. Vagus nerve, we talked about that weak tone leads to the poor motility, the SIBO risk. So there's all these chronic things. So before we dive into, how we address it, did you want to talk about any other axes? We talked about gut immune, talked about gut
Mhm.
liver, a little bit
Yeah.
about gut brain.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the immune system. So, this is really where, when things start to grow in places that they shouldn't, everything changes, right? Because in the small intestine, they're not just hanging out and causing gas. Now they're driving that inflammation, like you said, and then everything is getting out into the bloodstream. So that's going to go back to the liver and create all of these things. But at the same time, when your immune system is looking at these microbes and it's talking to immune cells, so we know about 80% of your immune system resides in the gut microbiome. Right. And so your immune cells should be identifying things and saying, hey, that's onion, that's spinach, that's chicken, whatever. Um, but instead, things start to miscommunicate and it starts to, mistakenly attack certain things. And this is why people start to have more and more food reactions. They're down to maybe I can tolerate 8 to 10, foods that I feel good with or whatever. And so I think that is really a big thing that you have to think about long term with your immunity, is that this is not just the bacteria, it's the immune system mistakenly understanding what you are being exposed to, whether that's foods that you are ingesting, it could be toxins, it could be other bacteria, even good bacteria. So it starts even reacting to the good things that we need to support our body. And so when we think about, the food sensitivities, just to break this down a little bit further for you, inflammation breaks down that gut lining, right? That is your barrier, that gatekeeper that decides what should get in and what should stay out. Those food particles that are not fully broken down into peptides that they should be and amino acids, they sneak through half digested. And so then your immune system is like, what the heck is going on here? I'm just going to start to attack. And now you've got antibodies showing up, or you've got things, if you're doing different tests or food reactivity, like we like the MRT test because that looks at more of like the chemical warfare and histamines and cytokines and mast cells and things like that. But all your favorite foods, you start reacting to. And it's not a food issue. This is the immune system's response. And so, what we ideally want to do is, with our blood work, with our stool testing, maybe a breath test, is pair that MRT mediator response test or release test with all of this so we can take out the things that your immune system right now is mistakenly identifying as an issue. Calm down the fire, put that fire out, clean up the debris, and then we can start to bring those things back in, and the immune system cannot be so crazy. So I think that is just a really big thing. And then the last thing I want to touch on here is another big miss with conventional and a lot of times in functional is missing gut lining support throughout your protocol. If you have a leaky gut, you need to heal and seal those tight junctions, or you're just literally going to continue to take 4 steps forward, 3 steps back because things continue to get out of the bloodstream. So work on healing and sealing. You can use immunoglobulins for this. We like peptides, of course, and depending upon the person, we might use more peptides or a single peptide, a combination peptide, right? It really just depends. But thinking about that long term, the intestinal permeability is a big deal. And I've not seen one person go through a conventional medical treatment with double, antibiotic treatment for SIBO and ever be supporting liver gut access or bile flow or gut lining, because in their world, they don't even still recognize, and I think they're coming around to it, but that this is really an issue. Like, intestinal permeability is now the medical term because they've started to wake up and understand, hey, that's going to continue to allow things to get into circulation in the bloodstream. And that's where we go systemic. And even things like you mentioned before, rosacea, um, acne, psoriasis, eczema, all those types of things, that shit's going to come out your skin.
Mhm.
So I just think there's a lot there. But what do we do? How can we, support this? Well, number one, you got to test and understand what you're dealing with, right? What type of SIBO do you have? Identifying the type. So again, just as a recap, from a hydrogen perspective, think diarrhea, loose stools, bloating, anxiety. Methane, we're going to think more of that constipation, fullness, not feeling like I'm fully emptying, sluggish motility, sluggish gut. Hydrogen sulfide, as Becca said, rotten smelling gas, sensitivity to sulfur, fluctuating bowels. So you could go back and forth. And so the treatment or the protocol, the plan to address these things starts with knowing what you're dealing with. But it also starts with opening up the drainage and detoxification pathways and supporting gut liver access before we come in with any antimicrobials. When you get into the eradication phase, or what people would maybe call kill the overgrowth phase, right? The strategy has to match the type, because there's different herbs and antifungals, even again. So if it's SIFO, right, then we're looking at antifungals, not just antimicrobials. And we have to look at the types and what they have been researched in terms of the different responses, right, to antimicrobials. So if we look at hydrogen, for example, we know that this responds generally the best, but this is going to respond to things like berberine, neem, oregano oil. A lot of these oregano oils, like nature's, antibiotic, garlic extract, or allicin. So some people say, well, I don't tolerate garlic. Well, allicin is the extract, and so you should be okay taking that, but I'm always cautious putting that in a little bit later on in protocols. Again, depending upon the case, you might go in with a rifaximin or xifaxin or, some other antibiotic, but at the same time, be supporting the gut lining, binders, gut liver access, all those types of things. When you look at methane, so the archaea here, these are not, again, actually bacteria, but these are tougher. They're stubborn and they are slow going. Sometimes your protocol can be up to 24, 26 weeks, really depending upon the person, their adherence and compliance to the protocol. Here's where we might, again, use some of those antimicrobials, but then also look at the stool test and see what do they need in terms of short chain fatty acids, different types of bile acids? What do they need in terms of probiotics? And you want to be cautious with probiotics with SIBO, but there are some strains that can be helpful. So L-reuteri, DSM 17938, this has been able to lower methane in the research. HN019 is one that improves constipation. Now, I'm going to tell you clinically, I don't see HN019 be magic. I've never seen a person take the HN019, which can also be really expensive, and just all of a sudden have good bowels. Like, you're looking at other things in terms of motility as well, and prokinetics and things like that. You might also here put in that UDCA, the undoleic acid that I was talking about earlier. If you've got nausea, belching, or upper gut symptoms that are present, we might add in partially hydrolyzed guar gum. This can help with hydrogen reduction and motility. It also can help with binding some different toxins, which is helpful as well. And then again, when we're looking at hydrogen sulfide, this is the trickiest because this is a combination and it does not always show up on breath tests unless you're using that Trio Smart. Symptoms there are going to be that sulfur sensitivity, combination or back and forth bowel movements, diarrhea, constipation, fatigue, pain. And this is where you're going to do all the things that we've already mentioned, but you're also going to make sure the person is on like a low sulfur, low FODMAP diet, and then doing different things to support binding up the gas. So as you can see, and you've probably, already said, wow, this is a lot, right? And we haven't even talked about different things that could help in terms of the immune system supports, right? Like calming down the immune system with LDN or rapamycin or low dose erythromycin, artichoke, those different types of things. This is really where it gets tricky. And this is where you need to have somebody guide you through these protocols. Also take into consideration, like we talked about earlier, adhesions. Becca and I both have had, she's had the tummy tuck. I've had 2 C-sections. Do you not think I'm going to be more prone or at a higher risk to having SIBO? I have a lot of scar tissue there, right? I'm still working through some of that scar tissue and I can feel it, especially, we'll talk about this when we get to the endometriosis podcast too, but especially around my period, right? Things get tight. I feel that inflammation more. I feel that scar tissue more. And so doing manual manipulation, massaging, cupping, doing some peptides, injections has really helped me. But I think if you have had, other abdominal surgeries or, potential, adhesions in those areas, you've got to think about that as well in terms of blockage. Because if you have, intestines that are being basically pushed on by scar tissue, or maybe your intestines are starting to twist or whatever's going on there, you're going to struggle a lot more with bowel movements and keeping things clear.
Yeah. And so, on top of what Liz already discussed in terms of how you approach and address the different types of SIBO, one of the big things is nervous system and immune supports. The reason that we discussed autoimmunity alongside SIBO is because when someone has a really overactive immune system, we see that they have essentially overgrowth of commensal bacteria. So not only do they have bad bacteria present, but they have too much good bacteria too. That's basically this like overgrowth of everything. And so when you close down the bacteria that's present, okay, maybe you've resolved one thing, but if you do not fix the immune issue, you do not fix the nervous system, the stress that's on the body, guess what? That bacteria is just going to grow back. And you're going to go through this roller coaster of I get better, I get worse, I get better, I get worse. And then maybe I never keep getting better and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse because you did not address the terrain. This is kind of what we talk about, like the terrain theory, in terms of you have to have a proper environment in the body to be resilient, not just asymptomatic, right? Like a lot of people can improve symptoms, but then when stress hits, when another trigger hits, things resurface, right? That body isn't resilient. They've just closed off symptoms a little bit, maybe with some supports or some supplements, right? So the terrain piece is the hardest piece with this. And that is where a lot of times we will later on in protocols use deep fasting, we'll use peptides, we'll use some of these deeper complex protocols to really do both things at the same time. And I see the same things on the hormone side of the world. Like when we have really dysfunctional hormone imbalances, you can take DIM, you can take progesterone, you can support the hormone system, but you have to calm down inflammation and the immune system at the same time, or else you will just resurface with all of those problems. So this is kind of this final thought is that SIBO is not just about lowering bacteria levels or gas levels or killing off the bugs. It is restoring balance in the GI system and in the body. You have to manage the gut lining, that leaky gut that can happen. Like Liz was saying, it's not just about getting rid of things, because if you still have a leaky gut, guess what? Shit's just going to come back to the whole environment. Like it's not going to solve anything. You have to get the immune system calm, or else that overactive immune system will just cause this bacteria to resurface. And it's literally rewiring the system. It is rewiring the immune system, the nervous system, and rebuilding homeostasis back to the body, which takes time. And so do not be discouraged. There is an answer. It is not something you have to live with, but you have to be patient. You have to be open to big changes, and you have to be willing to work through highs and lows. Because guess what? When you deal with the immune system and you deal with healing of an immune system, you are going to heal in flares, we always say. You are going to heal when the immune system comes back to a place where it can be managed. Guess what? You might have a skin flare up because your immune system's like, oh, okay, I'm working again. I'm reacting to things. And so you'll go through these little ups and downs throughout the process. And that's why I think it's so important to work with someone throughout it, because otherwise it can be really discouraging. It can be really confusing, and it can be easy to kind of jump ship on the healing because you're like, oh, well, it's not working. I'm having a skin flare up. Maybe it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. And so if you need help, if you do not know where to go, book a call with our team. We have the link in the show notes. See if our team is the right fit for you. And if you're the right fit for our team, right? We work with a lot of clients, and unfortunately, a lot of clients that have come from other programs, that have come from other practitioners and are still stuck. So that is all about SIBO. And if you want to give some final thoughts,
Yeah, the only thing
yeah.
I wanted to say there is just, I have a lot of clients, and Danielle's always happy to, chat with people. She came to me with recurring SIBO. And one of the things that we often revisit is that nervous system, and then, rewiring your thought process, because it's very easy to have PTSD, right? Once you have gotten to the other side and you have essentially put yourself in remission, and then you have a meal and you react, it's like immediately, it's like, oh my God, my SIBO is back. right? And it's also really thinking about how you're doing that emotional, mental rewiring work on the other side. I love primal trust for that, but there's a lot of things that people can do, seeing a therapist in person, right? But really getting to trust your body and having the belief that you can heal. Because I do think that people who continuously struggle outside of having, good protocols and recommendations and all the things that we talked about here today, they continue to struggle because they doubt and they don't truly believe that they can heal, and that is a really big piece of this as well. And so we recognize that it can be a situation where you have, that fear and you're scared and can feel like PTSD. Then you need to get in doing some of the brain rewiring work. And Primal Trust is a program that we really like for that. It's not until you get to level 3 in their program for the brain rewiring. They have you do a lot of other things first in your central nervous system. But if you're stuck in that fight, flight, or freeze state, you're going to slow down your healing tremendously. So that's the last thing I wanted to just close out with. And again, know that you can heal. There's many clients in our practice that they're always happy to talk with people because again, we understand that after you've gone through different protocols, worked with multiple practitioners, you doubt like what's going to be different about it this time. And I think for us, it's really looking at all of the pieces of the puzzle, and we don't have all that information, then we're going to talk to you about what we think that we need to get in terms of further information. And this is where genetics, I think, can be a powerful tool for people that have reoccurring gut issues. And that could be other things, not just SIBO, right? That could be recurring H. pylori. It could be reoccurring infections like staph or strep or just whatever it might be for you. Genetics can also be a powerful tool. So that was the last thing. And with that, we hope you guys have a fantastic Monday. If this was helpful, share it, rate, review, subscribe, and we'll see you on Wednesday.